Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. I'm very much hoping that the sound is optimal. At the very least, it is acceptable because my computer is definitely telling me things. So, anyway, welcome to this Cancer new moon forecast, the first new moon of the new season. You're right. We are just past the solstice window. Today is the 24th of June, 2025, and we are going to look at the main astrological themes for the next 2 weeks, our new moon and full moon. So, first and foremost, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for visiting this channel. If this is your first time here, and you know the drill, if you find value in this content, please find it in your heart to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share, comment, all the things, right? So, boy, oh boy, it went from temperate here in rural Pennsylvania to melting in a very short amount of time. So it is not even 10 a.m. where I'm at, and we're already pushing 85 degrees. Personally, my body seems to really love this weather of hot and humid. I think that, in a past life, I definitely was living in a much more tropical or equatorial environment. My body just really loves this weather. Probably the best I felt in a really long time. This was a long time ago. This is about 15 years ago. I spent some time in southwest India, which is, this temperature in December and January. But wow, it felt amazing to just be in such a hot and humid environment. So no, I'm not trying to jinx myself, but honestly, it's been hitting almost 100 degrees with, a fair amount of humidity where I'm at. And so it's been, I'm sure, very challenging for a lot of people. So I definitely have the clammy look going on here. And of course, the hair days to rival all bad hair days since yesterday, no matter what I do. So it's a good thing that I can just put on a ball cap and call it good. So, my friends, you know, First off, let's just kind of backtrack here a little bit. We are just barely coming out of the solstice window. So the solstice was technically and officially late in the evening on the 20th of June. That is when the sun reached its peak of either light or darkness, depending on where you are on the planet. And it usually kind of sticks around that particular area in terms of maximum or minimum daylight for about 2 to 3 days. So now we're coming out of it as of the 24th, and bam, right into a Cancer new moon. So of course, if you are part of the Catalyst membership, then you had the opportunity already to view the solstice report that was posted. I'm just going to show it here. I am the supply of personal forecasts for the solstice period, which is the next 3 months, already gone, right? People ate them up, so that's not an option anymore. However, if you are interested in the Catalyst membership and all of the things that it entails, you will get these types of seasonal forecasts, the eclipse forecasts, and any other special astrology reports, along with intuitive readings every other week and a deep discount on anything in my store. If you're interested in that, then you can still access this solstice report. Or if you're just interested in the report itself, you can go to my website, go to the store. You can find a digital download. It's just a smidge too large to upload directly to my website. They have a maximum amount of megabytes that you can upload things to with Squarespace. So if you do purchase it, make sure you do have a email address that is current, and then I will send you the link to download this solstice report. It's roughly about 90 minutes, so that's why it's a little bit too big to download. But anybody who actually has already listened to it, maybe you could put in the comments if you thought it was worth the $3.33 to get a sense of what to expect in the months ahead. Now, I will say that, oh boy, I think that reaching the solstice, and even in the next 2 weeks, this is really reaching a peak of so much that has transpired. I think, well, obviously for such a long period of time, but since the eclipse, the equinox eclipse, that was in March, and we are at the halfway point now through that eclipse cycle when we reach the solstice, knowing that the next eclipse cycle is also wrapped up in the next equinox, so in 3 months from now. So early September when we have a full moon lunar eclipse, and then on the on or just right before the actual September equinox, we're going to have another solar eclipse. So we're halfway there, living on a prayer, as I've said before. And I think that we're going to, this is kind of the peak time, this next 2 weeks. This new moon is setting the stage. We've been having challenge after challenge after challenge the last few weeks as anticipated and forecast since the March eclipses leading up to this time. I've been talking about it endlessly. I'm sure I'm not the only person that June into July was going to be such a hot time, and it certainly, at least here in the US, it's definitely been a heat wave, but also on the world stage, politically, socially, and I assure you, it's happening at a personal level, and those things tend to be very much this, different layers of the same energetic template that is influenced by the frequencies coming from everything in our solar system and even galactically. So that's part of the starseed astrology is the galactic astrology, but even just the mundane astrology, whether it's Western astrology or sidereal astrology, we are looking at the influence on us and our planet and certainly the solar system. So we're going to go into just the general themes here, the dates to look out for, just some reminders about the big transits that are coming because they are substantial. But we've already been through so much, and the energy of the upcoming new moon, which is tomorrow, the 25th, is very much, it's the Sabian symbol associated with it is exactly the image of the thumbnail, right? That a car is wrecked by a speeding train, and that the inhabitant of that car really needs to take the initiative to jump out of that car, because it is hubris really to think that this automobile is going to not only withstand but even stop the impact of this speeding train. The question is, what's the speeding train, what's the car, and what's us in the car? Well, I would say that in the next 2 weeks, setting the stage with this new moon, right? Again, the Sabian symbol that really evokes this karmic readjustment in many ways. Now that we're in Cancer season, when it's really by the full moon, we will have a full representation of the germination of the seed, right? Germination of a seed is really the crucifixion of the seed, right? And if you think of the seed as that Aries energy, right? The seed, the ego, right? The subjective self, which is essential in human development, right? It is our sense of I am as a person in this meat suit, as an avatar, with spirit inhabiting it, and our soul, essentially. The thing is that once we establish a root system, just like when a plant establishes a root system, it becomes more than just the seed itself. And I think this is a very complicated issue personally, because we have Saturn and we have Neptune now in the sign of Aries, very close to that vernal equinox, the 0 degrees mark. And part of this next 2 weeks is going to be the stationing of Neptune for its retrograde. So many interpretations, right? Certainly with a retrograde of any planet, we kind of internalize the experience. It's something that is turned inward. Maybe it's not totally fully expressed, but we kind of go into a review period. But it's been my experience that when Neptune in particular stations retrograde, the fog of whatever clears away, the house lights go up, and we have a much clearer view of that which is often shrouded in mystery, shrouded in the fog, shrouded in shadow, in illusion, right? It's Neptune often will rule things like film and shows and media and propaganda, right? So there is a film, there is a smoke and mirrors illusion element of Neptune, because it's everything is part of the picture here. So when Neptune stations retrograde, in my experience, in the times that I've been reading astrology, there tends to be a clearing of the fog, and it doesn't take away from the enormity and the broadness of what Neptune represents in terms of the spiritual humanitarian experience, but it clears away all of the illusions. And in the sign of Aries, especially at 3 degrees Aries, which in Sabian symbol language is a cameo profile in the shape of a person's country, suggesting that the individual at 3 degrees in this moment identifies him or herself with the greater life that is participated in. And that profile is going to become very clear once Neptune starts that retrograde and starts moving back. and it's an illusion, right? There's no planets that are actually going backwards. It's just relative to distance and speed and all of the planets' relationship with the sun. But that's coming on the 4th of July, along with the fact that Venus and Uranus will be conjunct at 30 degrees Taurus, which is in the Pleiadian star cluster. 30 degrees of any sign is a culmination. It almost brings about this sense of urgency in terms of the energy involved. And in Taurus, you're talking about a consummation of things that are very material and value oriented. And then, of course, these two coming together, Venus, especially in Taurus, which is very settled, right? Almost possessive of her value and her security and worth, and that which, is also beautiful and harmonious, right? This is the territory of Venus, and that's where she is now. And then up until the 4th of July, that's where she will be. But conjunct Uranus, that is, especially on the 4th of July here in the U.S., that is going to trigger quite a bit of rapid, unexpected change in terms of everything that has come to, like I said, a consummation point. And on the same day is when Neptune stations retrograde. So I think that a big awareness coming about in that moment. Like I said, the fog's starting to clear, a very stark view of that which we are aligned with, right? The delusion kind of falls away, right? The fog kind of clears, and you see the expansiveness of all of it. That is coming in short order for sure. So between this new moon represented by this speeding train coming at the individual will and consciousness, and that truly is what it represents archetypally. The tragic results when the individual will attempts to pit itself against the collective momentum. And that is, as much as Cancer energy is about the individual's feelings, right? The 4th house and Cancer, and even the moon, the ruling body of Cancer, as much as that's about how we individually feel, it is about the connection to something more than just us. And, this can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. One person that I read for recently brought up that it felt like that speeding train was all of the stuff over the past years that is going to, the inevitable conclusion to many people's decisions or the things that were put into motion, literally, right? So it, of course, depends on where these things are happening in your chart to get an idea of what area of life this is going to happen, which we talk about all the time, and why it's really important to become much more literate in your own astrology and take the time to practice if in fact you find value in this modality to help guide you through the events of the world and in your own life, because again, they seem to, at least in my experience, and I'm sure people watching this can also account for that they seem to be overlapping, right? People's personal experiences are often manifestations, or the collective experience is a manifestation of all of those individual experiences that are culminating at that level. So the full moon will be on the 10th of July. So we're going to get through this time period and come to a fruition, a fulfillment with the full moon in Capricorn. So the moon is at its detriment. But what I do see here is at this point, if we are in a position, which is not very easy for the moon, but if we can find a way to strip ourselves to allow the repressive tendencies to fall away, which sometimes they feel like they are the Cancerian protective mechanism, right? And this is, how PTSD really unfolds, because the body, here's a really good example, because I see this all the time with my body work clients, and this is how I explain it to them. The body will naturally splint the soft tissue in the face of injury, right? And so you have you imagine that you have a sprain of a joint, for instance, or even a break. But let's just talking about like a muscle sprain, or I'm sorry, a joint sprain, right? Ligament sprain in a part of the body. The muscles and the tendons and the fascia, all the soft tissue around that area is going to naturally splint in order to protect that area. And just like the inflammation response to any type of damage, right? Where it's flooded with fluid, right? And plasma and all of those things, right? This is a really baseline, but it actually does translate really well to emotional and mental health and the spiritual experience as well, right? These are all connected. We know this, right? So when this happens, the body will naturally splint, and that serves its purpose in the acute phase. It keeps that joint from being injured further because the ligaments have been overstretched, right? But in the process of healing, the body may continue to hold very tightly. That tissue may hold very tightly when it's unnecessary, and that starts pulling other things out of alignment, right? And so this is why it's so necessary to practice, do your physical therapy, getting massage, getting other types of bodywork modalities when you've injured yourself, and to allow that tissue to finally go back to a baseline. Because if it stays in that heightened, tight phase, things are going to get pulled out of whack, and you're going to start having other issues. And this is where decades long of postural misalignment turns into incredible pain in different areas of the body. Okay, so it's kind of the same thing here, is that, we're in this car, and we identify this car as, the ego, the shell of the seed. It's been taking us around, and it protects us and gets us where we need to go. And because all the potential of creativity is encapsulated in the seed, but in order to germinate, in order to really grow into our full potential, that seed has to go. And if we attempt to try to pit ourselves, right? That we don't want to give that up. We don't want to allow that process to happen. This is where the karmic readjustment happens, because it's going, spirit is like this train, right? It's coming whether we like it or not. This momentum is already on the way. And so we have to get ourselves out of the way and allow this process to happen and this karmic readjustment to happen. So for some of us, this might be something that we've been prepared for a while, and we may not have necessarily we didn't know when the car was going to stall on the tracks necessarily, but we also are very aware of, like, I'm getting the hell out of here, right? I'm not going to stick around. Or we know that germination requires the breaking open the seed. So the thing is that that's a protective mechanism. And so when we get to the full moon, as much as the moon is at its detriment in Capricorn, right? That vulnerability within ourselves wants to be protected. It's totally normal and natural and proper to do so. But at the same time, we are in a position to really release ourselves of these repressive tendencies that are inhibiting our growth. So the Sabian symbol of the upcoming full moon, which is on the like I said, the 10th of July is a repressed woman finds a release in nudism, right? Shedding away all of those social conditions that have been repressing us, holding us down. And really, if you want to think about it more naturally, you and I and all of us have the opportunity to really let go of what needs to actually be let go of. So again, this has a lot to do individually with where these things are happening in your life and certainly in your chart. And I've seen it be, there's two people in my immediate orbit in the last week or so that have reported to me that they've lost their job very suddenly. Some people have intentionally left an old career behind and are sitting with the unknown. So many other surprising and unexpected events happening in people's lives, of course. So it's really all over the place. And then, not to mention, what's going on, at least what we're being shown on the world stage is adding to all of this as well. So we have some, I wouldn't say some work to do other than to get out of our own way, honestly, and to allow this process to unfold quite naturally. And it can be scary. It can be seemingly counterintuitive. It will feel like we're being vulnerable, just like the repressed woman that joins a nudist colony. And you do feel vulnerable when you're not clothed in all of these social conditions or expectations or responsibilities, right? That's a very Capricorn thing. And of course, Saturn is the ruling body of the upcoming full moon, Saturn ruling the sign of Capricorn, which is also in Aries, and has been really, just kind of relentless about turning the mirror. So actually, that reminds me, I've been, I don't want to say like, oh, crystal of the week. It's more about like, I just kind of naturally gravitate towards different stones depending on what's going on. So I've been wearing, along with the shungite, I never take that off. This is mahogany obsidian, which is not nearly as blunt as straight black obsidian, and so it still provides the same blunt force, either at protection, but also as it was used as a scrying mirror in certain ancient cultures. It's not as blunt, right? Because obsidian can be used as quite the weapon, and sometimes we need that blunt force trauma. Sometimes we're gonna get it right with this speeding train. Right? But I've been wearing the mahogany obsidian to just kind of soften the blow just a little bit, right? And still giving you that kind of blunt view of things, but not nearly as destructive. And I do feel like that that the upcoming full moon in Capricorn, right, that we can intentionally shed those societal norms and expectations, whatever it is, right? Responsibility, structures, infrastructure, right? If the scaffolding, it's already on its way out, so may as well help the process along, right? Because if we try to pit ourselves against this speeding train, then we are going to have tragic results. I mean, that's just all there is to it. And some people, that is going to be the case. And the best thing we can do if we're not on that end of things is to be there to listen, be there to provide support and comfort as best we can. And maybe we need to be like, hello, get out of the way of the speeding train. But at the end of the day, we're each individually responsible. I think that Neptune's retrograde is going to be a big part of the unveiling, truly. Especially in terms of who we think we are and to how we're aligned and what we're aligned with. And so maybe, as destructive as that may feel, and certainly Venus and Uranus coming into conjunction, that's going to trigger some sort of rapid upheaval in terms of what we value and what allows us to feel safe and secure with Venus and Taurus. Perhaps we'll be well suited to release those things come the full moon. It might not be nearly as scary to to do so. But just like when you have an injury, right, and your body is naturally splinting, you have to do the work to the nervous system, right, to get it to a place where it doesn't, you don't feel at any level that there is any more danger or a need to splint, right? And in some cases there is, right? And that's why it's important to really check in with your body, have a good person that is doing facilitating that process, whether it's a body worker or a reader of some sort, whatever, healer, or just yourself, right? This is, again, it's important to have that your intuition kind of on point here. So there's just one more image I want to share because whenever I think about this degree, and this has happened for years, and I've never been able to really, but I think about it all the time, is if you've ever seen Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, the scene where he finally gets out, he's going through this whole journey where, it's based on the Odyssey. Gets out of gets out of prison, goes on this whole journey, finds his wife, and finds out that, as far as they're concerned, he got hit by a train. And that's just a line that runs through my head constantly with this particular degree. Not since you got hit by that train. So, take that for what it's worth. Maybe it's just something funny that gives a little bit of lightness to, a situation that may not be so light for you or people in your life, perhaps. So now I want to watch that movie just to see what nuggets of truth come out that I haven't noticed before. Anyway, let's get into the astrology, shall we? All right, friends. So we're gonna share the screen of this chart here. Oops, where are you? There we go. All right, so today's the 24th, where the new moon is on the 25th, so we're going to be looking at the stuff ahead here. I'm going to close out a couple windows just to support my system so it's not running so hot. Oh, there we go. All right, friends. So as you may have noticed, I mean, it's still very intense right now. So now we have Jupiter is now coming off its squares with Neptune and Saturn. So that was a lot of last week's energy as things in the Middle East, for instance, are really escalating and popping off. So, of course, Jupiter is the ruling body of Sagittarius. I will say that, we're in our balsamic moon phase, which means that the moon is coming through Gemini. It passed over the point of the new moon the new moon period that we're just now coming out of. So we're kind of revisiting that energy, which had a lot to do with, trust in the fundamental aspects of life and of spirit to provide that which we need. But we have to put some work into it, right? The well with the bucket and the rope. Yes, the well is there. Nature will fill the well, so to speak, but we have to actually do something to get the water out of the well. We have to, descend that root system, so to speak, in order to draw the water from the soil into our being. And so we're revisiting that over the last day or so. And along with that, as you can see, the Sun and Jupiter are going to be conjunct today. They are both in conjunct with our friend Pluto in Aquarius, still in its retrograde. Mercury and Chiron are in a square today as well. So, boy, oh boy, talk about really just bringing the wounds of self-worth and our creative potential and all of, our ability to act on those things. Chiron in Aries has been pretty pretty obvious about these things, I think. And of course, the U.S. natal chart, for instance, has a Chiron in Aries. So the U.S. has been going through its Chiron return as well as many other people, actually. I mean, Chiron has a 50-year orbit. And so if you find yourself within that time, age-wise, roughly in that area, I mean, you are or have gone through your Chiron return. So you're returning back to this point of original wounding. And oftentimes, Chiron will represent a mother wound, but I feel like it represents just the parental wound, the wound of coming into existence as we are and having to account for the things that we had no control over, right? That made their imprint on us, but then are also like superpowers, right? We are Chiron is the wounded healer. If it weren't for the traumas, for the wounds, for the experiences that we had no control over, we would not find ourselves in a position to be able to share that experience, to heal from that. But that means that we don't want to keep holding on to that. That's one of the biggest challenges of Chiron is the victimhood. And in this degree of Aries, and certainly in conjunction with the Andromeda galaxy, you Andromedan starseeds out there, you're probably really feeling it. I know that I am in terms of where this is in my chart. So Mercury in Cancer squaring that energy is just the ways that we conceptualize, our own emotional safety, boundaries, what is nurturing for us. That is really bringing these issues up to the surface. And I think, again, if we get too insular, because that's really the downside or the dark side of the Cancer energy, if we get too insular, right? If we become too protective, if we are too scared to release ourselves from all of those intense boundaries, if we just kind of fold into ourselves constantly out of fear, or out of doubt, or lack of self-esteem. I mean, boy, that is really where is the Cancer energy in the fourth house. That's really where that comes out of. If we are too scared, if we can't get ourselves out of that, and maybe it's all in our mind, right? With Cancer, with Mercury here, it's really going to bring out the wounds of being able to pick ourselves back up and try again, right? Just because we failed once doesn't mean that we will fail again. And I feel like that this energy is very, this energy of this square in particular is really coming up to the surface right now. This is a big starseed, galactic astrology configuration or aspect right now. Procyon is at 26, 27 degrees of Cancer, right? So the you Procyon starseeds, you know your story, and there is a deep, very deep story when it comes to Procyon about needing to contain and protect oneself because of past situations. And sometimes that leads people to doing things or acting in a way that doesn't allow them to have the vulnerability to come out and try again. This square is bringing this out big time. And how can you trust life and spirit to provide what is needed if you're shutting down mentally? I think that this square, as uncomfortable as it is actually allowing us to address this very issue, right? Just because the seed is sacrificed and crucified and we have growth into something new doesn't mean, and maybe it doesn't happen, right? If you've ever gardened or planted anything, there's no guarantee. And sometimes the elements and the environment will work against the fruition of that plant, for instance. It doesn't mean that you can't plant again. It doesn't mean that it won't propagate the next cycle. And I feel this really strongly with this square. So lean into it. If you're really having a hard time trusting spirit, trusting source, trusting God to provide what is needed to grow, because we're about to all have a huge growth spurt. Huge. All of us. Even for those of us who, want to think that we're like totally awake, and what more could we possibly grow into? I assure you, we're all about to have a huge growth spurt, and in different directions, certainly. So this square is really important to lean into. Also, on top of that, you can see pretty obviously that Lilith back into Scorpio again in her retrograde, the oscillating Lilith, in an opposition to Uranus. And when it was exactly opposed, it was the last degrees, right? So this is that Heyoka, especially Scorpio. It is the Heyoka, right? The relief from tension, the sacred clown, that which is kind of like the jester. And so, yeah, Uranus and Taurus, we can't control for that at all, right? And especially, this is the degree that Venus and Uranus are going to come into conjunction. So, again, being able to really lean into that tension, that opposition of, yeah, there are things that we can't control. There are things coming to consummation that have been, generations in the making, right? And yeah, Uranus might just completely, flip that around on a dime, but there is a power with where Lilith is in relation to Scorpio, that it comes from something and comes from somewhere that is infinite. And this is not only on the Taurus side, the Pleiadian energy, but on the Scorpio side, not only is it representative, in my opinion, of the Heyoka, I don't know if anybody else reads it that way, but that's how I read it, it's also starseed marking for Alpha Centauri. So for those of you who have 27, 28, 29, 30 Scorpio into 0 degrees Sagittarius, Alpha Centauri, and starseed origins is definitely coming into play. And those starseeds tend to be very giving, but not of themselves. They give of that which is infinite. And that's kind of the Heyoka energy too, that sacred clowning, that jester energy. So there's something to be said for this here to not, if you can't tap into this, Lilith, represents that place, that void within us that we'll try to fill ourselves, and then that always goes sideways and sometimes really badly or darkly. But when we can really identify that space within us for the divine intervention, right, that Pentecostal fire to come in, this degree is substantial. And with Lilith here, it's incredibly powerful. It is primal. It is something that we don't even, and like with everything happening, it's kind of like almost, it's like sacrilegious to like have, to clown about it or to have like a sense of humor about it or anything like that. But that's exactly the type of energy that we are being tasked to tap into, or at least leave a space for. Right? Because we can't control what Uranus in these last degrees of Taurus really represent. It is a shakeup of the very foundations, and it's clear that this is obviously necessary. So that's today. This quincunx with Jupiter and the Sun, also a conjunction that's happening today. This is a pretty intense day with our balsamic moon, taking us into, or our dark moon, right? Taking us into our next new moon. These two, of course, Jupiter and the Sun conjunct is usually a very favorable type of conjunction. It really kind of expands our optimism and happiness and good fortune, as Jupiter does. Jupiter's exalted in Cancer, meaning that it is powerful. It has spent a lot of time in its detriment in Gemini because of its retrograde in Gemini. So this, for the Sag people, has been a long time coming. It's like, oh, finally, to have Jupiter come into a sign that it is powerful in has been a welcome, in my opinion, being a very heavy Sag person. And I've read for solstice folks, I could feel, and personally, obviously, but even I could see the pattern of Sagittarius people wanting readings because the Sagittarius full moon really highlighted stuff for Jupiter-ruled people with all the squares over to Neptune and Saturn, and certainly this conjunction, not only with the sun, but with the new moon itself. And, the sextile to Mars as well that just happened. And of course, this quincunx to Pluto in Aquarius in its retrograde. So oftentimes, like I said, Jupiter and the Sun coming together is a very favorable type of activation in the sign of Cancer. 4 degrees Cancer is a really funny symbol. It's a cat arguing with a mouse. It's like continuing to justify something that is actually already happening, right? It's an attempt at rationalization or justification because we're still very close to the Gemini energy. And with the moon still in Gemini today, I think that this has the potential to really expand on that rationalization, which could be a very good thing, but also remember that there's always the potential for Jupiter to over exaggerate these things and to expand into boastfulness or greed, or in this case, it's boy, that's a big hit. Some type of manipulation, right? Like trying to justify, because of course we see the cat and the mouse interplay as just part of a natural contention of the cat the cat pursuing a mouse, because that's just their instinct, right? But it's also part of this justification with this degree. So these two coming together, maybe it's more of a justification within our own self. The fact that they're both in an inconjunct or a quincunx with Pluto in Aquarius is where we have to, I think, make the adjustment. And in some cases, I think in a lot of cases, but in some cases in particular, I do see that this inconjunct from Pluto is the very thing that not forces, but keeps that expansiveness into manipulation in check. Because these are two things that don't fit together. And 4 degrees Aquarius is really about like the responsibility to harness our spiritual gifts to provide healing for those that have tempted to throw things out of balance at a social level or at a human level, right? At civilization level. So man comes in, tries to disrupt the natural flow of things, and it's the spiritually disciplined person that is responsible for coming in the situation and attempting to find, assert the skill sets and the training to find that balance. And it's very tempting, I think, with this Sun-Jupiter conjunction in early Cancer like this to, again, to like talk ourselves out of something, maybe talk ourselves into something, maybe somebody's trying to rationalize something else. This quincunx to Pluto, I think, is very as unbalanced as it feels. It actually is keeping some things in check, which I'm very grateful of, right? Where's the power really coming from? Because that's what Pluto represents, is where the power is really coming from. So let's see here. So let's actually, now that we're, 40 minutes into this video, let's actually look at the new moon itself and then go from there. And because we've already gone over the energy of the new moon itself, the speeding train, right? The tragic results which are likely to occur when the individual's will pits itself carelessly. That is very important to consider. It's careless. If it's carelessly pitted against the power of the collective will of society, then there will be tragic results, which are likely. It's not definite, right? And it's about it being careless, right? Just like if your car stalls, or I have a really good example, a real life example. So on my way to the office, there is a railroad track that crosses the road that doesn't have any signals or barriers or anything, right? And it's hardly used. And so I often will slow down because I'm like, there's nothing here to alert me if something's coming. But yesterday, I just blew through it for whatever reason. And like within 5 seconds of crossing it, I start hearing this sound. And I'm like, what is that? And I thought it was my car. I didn't know what it was. And I looked in my rearview mirror, and here comes the fucking train, right? I mean, like, that should tell you everything. Like, talk about careless, right? Talk about careless. So I could get smashed, like completely smashed within moments of me crossing that railroad track. So take that, that carelessness of myself as a reminder about this new moon. And remember, new moon energy is setting intention, right? It's not something that's happening right here on the surface. That's much more of the full moon, right? The full moon will come and we'll have this culmination point of that energy and how we're going to respond to it. So that was intense, and a little scary. So the other things that are going to be happening, in there's a lot of sextiles going on the 26th, as we're going to see. And the big one is that Mercury is going to enter Leo. So it's moving out of Cancer and is going to move into Leo. And in fact, Mercury will retrograde in the sign of Leo this summer. So it'll be in Leo for quite a while. But I also want to point out, before that happens, the sextiles to Uranus. Sun and Mars will be in a sextile. Mars is moving through Virgo, really getting some shit done. We're coming into the territory of Draco, though. So that's something to be very aware of. As Mars comes into conjunction with Alpha Draconis in this part of the chart, right? We have to be very clear with ourselves in terms of our service and our disciplines and our patience, right? As Mars moves through this area. So maybe that's patience to know exactly when to act, right? Patience to know when to project ourselves into our work, or a situation that requires our work. That's important, because otherwise, you know how Mars is, right? It's just action. In a sign that requires patience and diligence, coming into conjunction with Draco is not a terrible thing, right? If anything, it might actually influence us to be more patient and to really settle into the right timing of things. And the fact that it's in a sextile with the sun does suggest a harmonious connection, and that there is an objective life force that we can tap into. But what are we tapping into it for? Well, I would say this connection to 5 to 6 degrees Cancer, the game birds feathering their nests, right? The idea that we are putting that energy, or gathering our resources and feathering the nest, so to speak, as a way to prepare for this new energy to come in, right? And in order to do that, we have to, again, strip away those social conditions that are very repressive. And that's coming with this full moon. So these sextiles are really helpful. And Venus actually is in a sextile in her home territory, is in a sextile with the nodes. And you can see actually that this is creating a mystic rectangle with Lilith up here as well. So not quite there yet, but they will come into a direct opposition, Lilith and Venus. So the divine feminine and the dark feminine. So that'll be fun, of course. So these sextiles are all very much harmonious, but they require our participation in some way. And so there is 22 Taurus is very much the white dove flying over troubled waters, right? We know that a new mandate is coming down from above. That's the North Node at 22 Pisces, right? We take this peak experience, whatever it is in our life, and apply it to everyday life. And this is what is pulling us at a soul level right now. And the sextile from Venus is tapping into our intuition, tapping into our feels, tapping into our actual value, and being open to the signs, the synchronicities that show us that there is peace, that there is blessing coming from this mandate, whatever it is, right? 21, 22 degrees Pisces is, Moses bringing the law down from the mountain. But the idea of this great peak experience being brought down into something very tangible. Well, that tangibility, I think, has a lot to do with Venus and Taurus. It doesn't get more tangible than Venus and Taurus, right? Of what allows us to feel safe, secure, what we value, right? So very, very harmonious and a lot of potential here right after this new moon. And of course, new moon phases, like I said, there's not a lot happening. It will come to culmination at the full moon. So the fact that Mercury is coming into Leo is the first issue of actual, well, not the first, but I think it is actually, since Saturn and Neptune have come into Aries, Mercury is going to have a fire trine with both of these energies, which I think is like a really good stabilizing force of creative energy. So, you know, the thing is about Mercury coming into Leo is that our expression becomes very bold, very confident, very creative, very dramatic, right? When we're talking about Leo energy. And 2 degrees Leo is an epidemic of mumps, okay? The idea of an infectious spread of something. And I would say with Mercury involved, we're talking about communication. So this is a little bit of a warning that communication that spreads rapidly but may lack substance, right? Or cause unintended consequences, like a trend or an idea that catches on. Saturn, the trine to Saturn is the thing that's going to really ground it into something pragmatic and practical. There's a disciplined, insightful approach, that uses humor. So go back to that Heyoka energy, or sharp observation to ground and direct that energy, right? If you just get caught up in the rapid spread of fake news or trends or ideas that have no substance, it's going to be the trine to Saturn that really grounds this energy and directs it towards the truth, right? This configuration can really encourage, for you to take charge of your ideas or the narratives, right? Steering them towards clarity rather than getting caught up in the spread of misinformation, for instance. And there's nothing wrong with communicating boldly. You might have something to say, right? You may have something that you want to get out there. But Saturn's discipline is going to ensure that those words are meaningful and responsible. And they will reflect something objective, because that's where Saturn is right now, a comedian that reveals human nature. So, and it's also on the 27th that Venus and Lilith are in their opposition. So Venus is like, I'm just like settling into the value of what is, right? And Lilith in Scorpio is about the power to take those base energies and transmute them, or bring them into a more ethereal, potent form. So that's going to be a challenge all in itself on these same days. So Mercury is going to be opposite Pluto. Now on the 2nd of July, so now we're starting to get into July, okay? So let's keep going here on the actual chart. Mercury and Pluto, of course, in their opposition. That's just, an intense communication. And again, 4 degrees Leo is like, we want to dramatize our achievements, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's it's one thing to, I kind of get this sense of like dramatizing what we've done and really trying to gain the attention of our peers, for instance, right? Look what I've done, I've achieved all of these things. Look at these accolades, right? And Pluto in Aquarius is like, yeah, but how is that actually helping the collective, right? I think this opposition is going to, really bring out like, okay, so you've achieved these things, maybe it's time to really do some deeper research here about these things and these expressions and how they're going to be of service to the community or the collective, how they're going to transform, right? The collective. I mean, this is Pluto and Aquarius we're talking about. So when we get to July, especially the 2nd of July, this is, we're going to have our first quarter moon, okay? And that's going to be in Libra, okay? And as with all quarter moons, right, this is a crisis point. It's a square between the sun and the moon. So there is a square between our external expressive part of our personality and the moon, which is our emotional landscape. And this particular square has to do, so number one, you have this kind of surfacing from a deep coal mine, like this extraction of information or knowledge that we've had to go very deep to get. And the sun in Cancer is about a revelation, right? And so it does, the moon here, and of course it's a crisis in action. What do we do, right? And there's no, well, you do this or you do this. And I would say that the discomfort of this, these cardinal squares of Cancer and Libra is that we do have on some level, we feel the need to go deeper into our relationships, into the social contract, for instance, into, Libra's the 7th house, right? Whatever that contract is, go deeper and in order to extract, but also too, there's always the potential for asphyxiation in that mine, right? You got to surface from the mine in order to extract what is down there. You can't just stay down there. And I think that that also is going to keep people from just kind of staying in underneath the surface, so to speak. The sun in Cancer, yes, we're very identified with those Cancerian energies of home, of family, of protection, emotional boundary, right? But there is a need. And remember, the moon rules Cancer. So there is this sense of like, well, we got to come out of that to a certain extent in order to bring knowledge, information to the surface. And I think that we'll all feel that in our own way, right? Because again, you kind of just want to stay in this area. But there's also something to be said for the revelatory experience as well. And we can't necessarily discount that either. So this is going to come out with this first quarter moon. And of course, that quarter, that energy lasts throughout up until the full moon. So it's the 4th of July, like I said, and I'm going to show it to you, where Venus and Uranus come into conjunction in the Pleiades. So, Pleiadian starseeds, you are on deck. Big time. Big time. And there's lots of us, you know what I mean? And then Neptune, as you can see, stations. And we just talked about that quite a bit. Now, Venus coming into Gemini is going to sextile Saturn, sextile Neptune. So coming into Gemini, it's going to already kind of start this process of harmonious transformation with in terms of, Venus can bring what otherwise is very mental realm into our bodies, into our sense of value, into our sense of security. And the sextile, it's like it's going to help kind of integrate these themes of Saturn and Neptune in Aries, which is about a whole new creative potential coming online, right? That's crystallizing with Saturn. And it's going to come into, it's going to be fully activated in 2026 when these two are conjunct at the vernal equinox in 2026, right, at 0 degrees Aries. So Venus coming into this is really going to bring that sense of balance, the capacity to really feel into both sides of a situation, whatever it is, just like once the seed germinates and the seedling pops up above the soil, that's the Gemini energy, right? Reaching towards the light, growing in that way. And so I do feel like that Venus coming into here is, going to take that activation of Uranus, something that is going to be even just a stirring of rebellion in some ways. And of course, it's the 4th of July, right? The Declaration of Independence, the fact that there was the rebellion of the colonialists against England was, formalized with this. And so Venus coming into it, it becomes very palpable, becomes very real, becomes very valued. Yes, Uranus could shake some things up with its connection to Venus, but it also could shake up within us to bust out of something into a new thought form, basically, coming into Gemini. And then the sextiles from Saturn and Neptune, I think, are really favorable here. Now, the other main thing before we get to the full moon, this is a big one. And the fact that it's happening on 7/7 is not lost on me at all, is that Uranus moves into Gemini. So this is going to be like the first time that the Stargate opens. You know what I mean? So this is Alcyon, right? This is Alcyon in the Pleiadian star cluster. This is also the Sabian symbol of 0 degrees Gemini. 0 to 1 degrees Gemini is a glass bottom boat. And it's this whole idea that there is, this capacity to be able to view the vastness of the collective unconscious, right? The collective psyche, which is under the ocean, right? But there is the glass bottom, right? What is that? Well, that's our own consciousness, right? That's our own sense of self separated from all that there is. And we are able to view this new dimension of being without being totally consumed by it. Uranus coming into Gemini is, a a big mental kind of awakening, right? Now, that could that could certainly manifest in a lot of different ways. I do feel like that, that this has something to do with the markets and probably crypto. I would focus much more on that when Uranus stations retrograde in early September at 2 degrees Gemini. I have a feeling that that's going to be much more of the time when things crash, but we'll see. But that's when Uranus is going to station retrograde, is early September, right before the lunar eclipse, actually. So that's something to pay attention to. But 7-7, this is when Uranus comes into Gemini for the first time in 84 years, right? Because that is the orbit of Uranus. This is why your Uranus opposition in your natal chart usually marks a midlife crisis, right? Because this is the time where your natal Uranus is in an opposition to the transiting Uranus. So the means in which you rebel, right? And that's kind of the standard stereotype of your midlife crisis, is that you're rebelling against your own development and aging, and then you do things that are like outside of the realm of what you're supposed to, what you're responsible for. So, but really, Uranus is, rebellion and freedom and flipping the script, so to speak. I get the sense that it's, coming right after the 4th of July, the conjunction with Venus, the retrograde of Neptune, and then you have Uranus coming into Gemini. Talk about just, disclosure. I don't know exactly what it's going to be. I don't know how it's going to be, but it will be kind of like a viewfinder of the whole thing without maybe getting pulled into the experience of it, right? So that's going to be very intense and interesting and awesome. I mean, I know that there are really terrible, tragic things that are continuing to happen to people. It's part of the awakening process. And I've already, I've certainly personally been through quite a bit in the last year and a half, so I can speak personally about this, and I can also empathize with it. But we're also in incredibly exciting times here, not the least of which is Uranus coming into Gemini. I mean, I just feel like this is a huge portal opening in some ways, right? An awareness that just gets triggered in a way that is beyond what we've known. Right, because that's the thing about Taurus, is what we know, our traditions, the medium of our growth as it is, right? The inert soil, and coming into Gemini is that that seedling popping out of the ground for the first time, reaching for the light. And sometimes, that's like breaking through the soil. And Uranus is going to be that trigger point that breaks through the soil on the 7th. And then we come into the full moon on the 10th, which, as I said before, is the crucifixion of the seed, right? Where we shed the old aspects of who we've been and allow ourselves freedom from the repression, right? And you can even see on the chart here that this is where things will be. Mercury will be in Leo, Jupiter still moving, all the way through Cancer. And, that's kind of the big transit on that day. There isn't a lot surrounding it at that very moment, so which is probably a good thing, right? It really gives us the opportunity to just fully be in the moment as this full moon comes to culmination. So, my friends, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. I'm going to check in with you one last time here before we close out for the day. So I hope everyone is taking very good care of themselves as best you can. I mean, it's really imperative that you do so, that we all do so, right? Whatever our practices is. And thankfully, Mars being in Virgo, I think, is a really helpful energy for this, right? That we can project ourselves into our work, into our practices, into being patient and determined. Remember, we are in the year of the snake, right? And if you remember the presentation that Kiana and I did, being patient, like the whole theme of the year of the snake is about being patient, is about being determined, right? The long game here, and knowing when to strike. That's a big part of snake energy. And of course, the wisdom of the serpent, the kundalini energy that is coiled and is released only when the conditions are right for that to happen. And as I've said many times, as well as other people, it's not like I'm the only one saying this, when the Kundalini is activated without the proper conditions, this is where madness comes from. And I think many of us have probably been through that in some way, shape, or form. And sometimes the spiritual awakening does feel like you're going mad. So, Mars being in this position, I think we can put our energy very successfully into our works and labors, our practices, being patient, and really conditioning that bold action that Mars represents into a functionality that is patient, and that is determined and resolute. And I think that's going to be very helpful. So, my friends, thank you for being here. Truly appreciate all of you so much. You know, I don't have any more solstice readings, but I will be doing an intuitive reading for the Catalyst membership this Friday. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up in the link in the description box. There will be a full moon report because as of next week, I'm going to be going on vacation. So I will have a full moon report recorded and scheduled to post around the time of the full moon, probably not on BitChute because I don't think it really allows for that scheduled uploaded or that scheduled publishing, but I'm pretty sure that Rumble does, and I know YouTube does. So that will be there as well. But on Friday, I will be doing a full intuitive card reading for the Catalyst membership. So you can always sign up if you're interested in getting some extra support through this process. And, you know, if you want a personal reading, you know, we can always custom readings based on your budget. If there's something in my store or services that doesn't quite fit what you need, but you know that you need some sort of reading or guidance, or you want just some sort of attention, you can always reach out, email me and let me know, and we can figure something out custom wise. And I do offer one-on-one calls that are very much just in the moment. So that's a one-on-one consultation, and that's something you can book through my website as well. So my friends, take care of yourselves. This is incredibly dynamic time right now, and we are going into uncharted territory for sure in most of our lifetimes. Unless you're over the age of 85, this is going to be new for all of us, and so it's imperative that we are staying grounded, and but not so grounded and insular that we're not willing to break out of the shell that no longer serves us. Okay. So, love you guys. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate all of you so very much. I'll see you on the next video. Take care.